as the viewers may or may not know, the sort of pace of the blockchain space it comes and goes in waves in terms of excitement around new things and things like that, and the market cycles as well sort of align. So more recently, there's been sort of what you call a bull market in crypto for the last, say, year, 6 months or so, maybe. And so there's a lot of institutions and others collaborating to sort of show themselves as tech forward and adopting the blockchain, whereas a year or two ago, it may have been a bad word in institutional circles and others. And so,
can I stop you? Is that just because of FTX is what gave it a bad name, and now is it the ETFs that are if you had to point to two specific things?
Yeah, if you want to, basically you can sort of characterize the cycles downstream of big events like that, right? So, for example, the ETF may be the pinnacle of a bull market or the kickoff of a bull market, whereas FTX and others like it, like the lending platforms that went bust and others like those might have been emblematic of the bear market. And then during the times when these things are happening, the sentiment shifts wildly from one side to the other. And so when it comes to, I guess, corporate positioning and just institutional signaling, there's obviously that follows on from public sentiment to some degree. And so institutions, I think, during the FTX debacle sort of tried to wipe whatever blockchain initiatives, brush them all under the rug they had. But now it's sort of coming back with the nod to the blockchain industry by the ETF and things like that. And that's what I think a lot of people believe it is fueling this bull run, but also fueling the rise in activity from the institutional side and also just retail money in the space. And so coming back to BlackRock specifically, they started a 100 million USDC, so that's the equivalent, that's a stablecoin equivalent of dollars, fund on Ethereum. And so they seeded that fund with 100 million US dollars. And so and they named it the BUIDL fund. And so they're trying to capitalize on the misspelled meme that some of you may know about. So there's the HODL meme in Bitcoin, which is a misspelled version of hold that came from an old forum post. And so BlackRock is signaling that they are a builder in the blockchain space. That's sort of, and it actually stands for, I believe, BlackRock USD Institutional Digital Liquidity Fund or something like that, acronym wise. But really what they're trying to
let me just stop you in case people are driving, just to make sure. So folks, and this is simple stuff, Zuhar, but just to make sure we're not losing anybody. So the Bitcoin enthusiasts, like their deal is, oh, you want to hold, and even if the price goes down, no, just stick to it, man. You got to put your faith into it. You got to look to the future. And then I think it was on a Reddit post a while ago, they meant to type in HOLD for hold, and they just did a typo and did HODL. So now HODL or HODL is like the catchphrase. And so you're saying for the BlackRock people, they wanted to kind of give a nod and a wink to that community. So their fund is spelled BUIDL instead of like the more normal build. But yet they did come up with an acronym to fit those letters.
Exactly. It's the BlackRock USD Institutional Digital Liquidity Fund, BUIDL. Okay. And actually that whole post initially was on the Bitcoin Talk forums, which was, I believe, the same forum that Satoshi initially formed his community on. So that is a very central meme to the blockchain sort of space. And then BUIDL was also a meme before BlackRock started this fund in more of the Ethereum circles and sort of the smart contract development space. And so it was sort of a nod to the original. But yeah, that's the history of the memeology there, if you want to call it that. So really what BlackRock has done is they've seeded a fund with stablecoins on Ethereum. And it's a big step for institutions, I would say, optically as well as perhaps practically, although there was nothing really stopping them from doing this like 4 years ago. It's really just they've finally taken a step to do something like this on a public blockchain, which they've been hesitant to do in the past. And for good reason, as you're about to find out.
Well, let me stop you. So just first principles here.
Yeah.
Someone might say, what do you mean they launched $100 million? Like, first of all, if it's on the Ethereum blockchain, doesn't it have to be in ETH? So what do you mean they're using different tokens? And then what does it mean to have a fund on a blockchain? Like, what does that even mean?
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. So on Ethereum and other smart contract compatible blockchains, and actually on Bitcoin, more recently, you're seeing these digital representations of fiat currencies. So on Ethereum, you have tokens like USDC, which is the fund that what the fund is denominated in, which is a parallel to the US dollar in fiat currencies, except in its tokenized format. And so the way that it functionally works is individuals or institutions will deposit money with Circle Corporation or the custodian of USDC, the issuer of USDC, and then Circle will issue USDC tokens that are fully backed by the USDC or by the dollars that they deposited initially onto the Ethereum blockchain in the form of an ERC20 token. So ERC20 is just a token standard. So there are multiple different tokens, as you know, on the Ethereum blockchain, in addition to ETH, which is the base layer token. And so USDC is one of those, and it represents a dollar's worth of value. And so when a institution wants to denominate in US dollars...
Can I stop you, Zuhar?
Yeah.
So economically, because we have overlaps in our audience. So for those who are interested in like money and banking from an economics perspective, particularly from the Austrian, so it sounds like what USDC does is the digital, blockchain analog of just more conventionally, like what happens if you want to open a checking account with a bank, you go and you might give them $100 bill and then, they credit your account, then you have like a debit card. And so now you can walk around town and spend your $100, but strictly speaking, when you go to the grocery store and slide your debit card, it's like you have a claim on that actual $100 bill, and then things happen digitally to be able to transfer that around. So here it's people have US dollars in more conventional forms, and then they hand that over to Circle, and then they give them things that are effectively claims on those dollars. And so long as the community trusts the redeemability of those, then now you can go out and spend dollars on blockchains.
Right, magic internet money.
Yeah,
I mean, there's sort of like the fact that you're trusting a centralized corporation is one risk that I think institutions see in the structure you described. And actually, there's been attempts at algorithmic stablecoins that cut out the sort of centralized institution and instead use a stability algorithm mechanism to maintain their peg. Those have gone horribly wrong in the past. Terra, Luna is one example that your audience may have heard of, and others like it. So really the only model that has worked for long periods of time in crypto, long periods of time is or blockchain. It's a few years, is the fully backed stable coins like USDC and USDT, although that is somewhat debatable for some people in terms of the backing. So that there's a lot of back and forth about that. But ultimately...
Real fast, that's why this is so interesting to me as an Austrian economist, because that was one of the long-standing arguments we've always had is over fractional reserve banking, and to say in a more unregulated, laissez-faire environment without the central bank sort of acting as a lender of last resort, without FDIC, would the public want checking accounts that were basically fully backed by cash in the vault? In which case you couldn't earn interest on your checking account. In fact, you'd have to pay a fee to the bank. Otherwise, why are they maintaining ATMs and things like that? And you check processing services. Or would people be willing to have not 100% backing? So, the total amount of checking account balances is greater than the amount sitting in the vault. And that's why a bank run's possible. If everyone shows up to withdraw their checking account, the bank says, sorry, we don't have it. But then if you are willing to tolerate that, then the bank can afford to pay you interest because they lend out some of that money and they just, earn a spread and blah, blah, blah. So that was an interesting academic dispute. And so that's what's neat about looking at these stablecoin markets, is to see, what does the public, what do they want? Where, given that they want to, quote, hold cash, how do they want it to be backed up and so forth? So anyway, that's just kind of a neat economist angle to all this.
And another economic tidbit is that you don't get any yield on your USDC, even when interest rates are like 8%, like USD. Circle will keep everything, right? And it's like there are alternatives cropping up, and actually the economic model for Sound Token will address some of this. But really the idea behind USDC is it gives you utility in a blockchain ecosystem where you don't have access to fiat. You have a programmatic form of US dollars that you can use to denominate your contracts in and whatever other activity you're doing on chain. And that's the utility. And in exchange for that, you're giving up all the potential interest you could be earning on the money, because Circle's earning it in the back end. And sort of that's their business model. And so coming back to the fund, so BlackRock specifically So they denominate in this USDC asset because they're not crypto native, as you might say, because obviously they're large institution. They're trying to dip their toes in. They're not trying to go 100% ETH allocation type of thing. So they seeded the fund with $100 million of USDC. The intention or the stated intention of the fund was relatively vague, but from what I gleaned, it was that they're trying to recreate sort of a money market type of structure on chain using whatever real world asset analogs there are on chain. So, for example, they might deploy 10 million USDC into some yield bearing safe asset that's available on the Ethereum blockchain. And so this $100 million is available now to deploy within the Ethereum ecosystem into different smart contracts, into different yield bearing assets and things like that. So that's the purpose of the capital. And then do you want to get to the drawbacks of doing it on a public blockchain?
Well, but right before we do that, just one more bit of just for the audience to understand, me too, to understand exactly what their fund is. So is it like that was already some people had invested with BlackRock and then BlackRock just deployed their money, now it just sits there and it's on autopilot? Or like other people can get into that fund if they want to?
Yeah, so as far as I understand, the 100 mil was a fixed seed amount for the fund. And it may have been from their original reserves, or it could have been that they raised the fund specifically with third parties. The information that I could glean, it wasn't fully clear. But the end result is there's a sort of digital liquidity fund that they've established for institutions, really, institutional facing. And then that's really like, I think the signal is much more important because for them, it's a relatively small amount of money compared to their total balance sheet. I think what they're trying to signal is that institutions are ready to adopt blockchain rails, specifically public blockchain rails for institutional finance. And so I think that's a more important message that came out, or the more important a motive behind this fund, as far as I can see. Because there are others like JP Morgan who are doing the Onyx project and other things like this. So nobody wants to be left behind in terms of adopting new tech, but they also have to consider the risks when there are a large institution that's very heavily regulated, et cetera. And so that's why it's taken so long to adopt, because the blockchain space is very wild west in that regard.
Okay.